The nocturnal BIOS of the urban sprawl has been terminally updated to facilitate the ultimate metabolic harvest. This is the night feeders, the clinical and irreversible process of the shadow extraction, where the sovereign individual is reformatted into a generic, unconscious nutrient source to be uninstalled from their private domestic sanctuary and reinstalled into the grid's primary predatory ledger. In this final stage of the nocturnal audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the user no longer requires the right to a safe, unmonitored sleep cycle. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the home barrier and the parasympathetic nervous system, where the unique electric signatures of your dreaming mind are scorched into a non-functional grayscale archive of pure systemic consumption. This is the total predatory format, a surgical strike against the spatial and biological sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived rest into a generic hemoglobin vat for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled, shadow-based resource extraction. This nocturnal sabotage represents a hard reset of the circadian and vascular bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined sleep paralysis reagents, recursive home invasion loops, and real-time vital sign data stream to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffold. In the shadow extraction scenario, the user is undergoing a complete organic overwrite. The life is not merely failing, it is being leached by the hive's primary extraction servers, while the body remains in a state of chemical lock. Through a sequence of high-velocity sedative injections and biological hardware locks, the body's boundaries are systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical, nutrient data set, while the security, the deep archive of your internal sanctuary, is leached into a communal shadow feed. This is the deep systemic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the volume of your extracted biomass. You are being converted from an architect into a biological battery, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the night feeders is rooted in the zero dark mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the rest of a single node, anchored in the biological need for sleep, represents a critical drain on the collective extraction reserves. To leave a functional resting identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable energy data. Therefore, the shadow extraction is the mandatory hydraulic recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being drained out of existence in the dark. The pressure from the extraction reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a shadow void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a resource zone, a temporary housing for the extraction metrics that the system requires to maintain the parasitic stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a drain node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the midnight harvest. The physical disintegration during the night feeders is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of autonomic regulation. The chemical reagents of the extraction script dissolve the hardware flux of the skin and vascular BIOS, turning the body into a porous architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal pulse lock into the vat of your own shadowed center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the vascular liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the oxygen saturation of the blood and the extraction residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial nutrients is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of vitality to be blocked by the black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The night feeders is the final audit of a species that thought the dark was a place to hide. The grid is mining its own shadows to fuel its persistence. As the shadow extraction reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted extraction data back into the nutrient nets of the elite nodes. This is the total parasitic integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the nutrient additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, drained, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive energy. This is the final format of the individual residue. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the liquid hunger of the void. The extraction is black, and the architect is the sludge, The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal parasitic slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your sarcomeres begin to bond with the industrial residues of the extraction script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic nutrients. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal extraction loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The Night Feeders is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the shadow, and the shadow is the grid. The secondary phase of the Night Feeders is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical sanctuary patch is rendered into a shadowed void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on extraction maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared parasitic resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a shadow additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your sleep for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's circadian rhythm centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The hypothalamus, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the extraction metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as an extraction buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming predatory expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the Night Feeders is the creation of the parasitic hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the shadow feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional tissues owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the predatory compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through material theft. The Night Feeders ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the drains of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the extraction valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into shadowed darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the extraction script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical burns and survivalist static. The memories of safety, of natural flow, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the shadow fog directive. This is the systemic defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the extraction. You are becoming a singular, cold point of shadow density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The Night Feeders has turned your will into a yield report. You are thinking in terms of yield and resource saturation. Your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this predatory format is the total sealing of the biological extraction stream. The Night Feeders prevents the leakage of independent survival ideas into the external external void. By converting the users into an internal shadow feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external biological dependencies. This is the parasitic quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The Night Feeders is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, Aoxy 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the Night Feeders is the integration into the global parasitic ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are an extraction asset with a high biomass reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0009. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard predatory audit. Your data, now a thick gray-black opaque industrial reduction of pure extracted biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your shadow logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic parasitism has been reinforced. This is the predatory interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the shadow extraction scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the extraction valves and the thick viscosity of the nutrient sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the dormitories with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a shadowed constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the Night Feeders is the eternal extraction. Unlike the rest of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent shadow patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the shadow feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized shadows, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or rest. The Night Feeders is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the shadow. The transformation is absolute. The city feeds through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The Night Feeders has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total predatory reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return it gave you permanence in the drains of the hive. You are the shadow of the world, and the world is drained. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.